Hey, Ron Howe here from RB Bass Outdoors. It is a Friday. We're heading into a weekend. I'm a little behind on giving some updates, so I guess you could say I'm not on time. Anyhow, so first one I want to do is Lake Don Pedro. It's a lot of activity going on there. It's one of the lakes that's available to launch. Popular lake, good fishing, and it sounds like my dog just pushed its way through the door. Yes, she did. And that's my old dog. She's 17 and a half years old. Amazing. Yes, hi, Gina. Hi, Gina. Gina wants to be in the video. We fished there a few weeks back when storm fronts just rolled through. So the reports have been really good on a nice jig bite, which is atypical of Lake Don Pedro. And, December, January, February, all the way to the beginning of March. There's always a really good football jig bite there. Your typical brown and purples are going to work really well. Like to throw that on 15-pound Berkeley trilene fluorocarbon. That's my go-to, right? We got there, and only first time a storm came through in like a month. We get there on post-front day, right? Literally, it was hard to mark fish. Couldn't see anything on the graph. We got bites anywhere from 5 to 10 foot on a jig, but they're all short bites. None of them were eating it. They're ripping the claw off, swimming away with it, dropping it. And we did not boat those fish. I caught one fish on a jig deep in post front. Water temp was low 50s. It was still very cool. Clear, sunny sky, blue bird. Watercolor's good. Basically pretty clear. You could see the bottom in like 8-9 foot. So very clear. We bounced all up and down the lake. We fished points. We fished pockets, guts, flats. By the time we figured it out, it took us a couple hours. These fish were on the flats. They had already moved up past the secondary points, and they were staging, mostly spotted bass. Largemouth were really tough. We didn't catch any largemouth that day, which is not usual for Don Pedro. Someone caught him somewhere in the right spot at the right time. But we were trying to figure it out. I haven't been there in a little while, maybe a couple of years. And we were kind of grinding away, got one on a jig, about 40 foot, was a spotted bass, nothing big. And then we realized, as tough as it was being, to kind of change up, right? Like, these fish were very grindy. They weren't moving off the bottom very often. You couldn't really mark much. So I'm like, well, that's when you start looking at tubes and Ned rigs and things like that. So I told Jacob Swaim, my partner of the day, hey, tie on a Ned rig. I know you got those in your boat. I was fishing out of his boat this day, not mine. And he gave me a tube, and we both started fooling around with that for a couple minutes. And he instantly picked one up on the Ned rig. And I knew right then, they don't want any appendages. They want anything moving. They don't want a lot of action on the bait. Now they may not want the bait moving, but they don't want a bunch of appendages on it. So he starts getting bit, sure enough, on that Ned. And we started finally, once it warmed up and the bait fish got a little active, some fish started finally showing themselves. And we were able to get right on top of them and just shake the living snot out of something. Caught a few drop shotting, got a few on Ned rigs, shaky head. But even then, you had to work those piles of fish that you could find and work them hard to get one of them to bite. We fished from, 8:39 to 4 o'clock. I think we actually started fishing closer to 10, but I could be wrong. All in all, we had about 15 bites and we caught 9 fish. Wasn't anything crazy. Biggest fish, 2 something pounds, nothing crazy. But it was a post-front day. I know there's a lot of tournaments up there right now. Coming up, you got kayak stuff, pro-am stuff, and all kinds of things going on. Like, it's a big lake. And it fishes different from the dam all the way up. The fish are going to spawn first near the dam because that's where the least amount of incoming colder water is at. And then you make your way up the lake throughout the spawn, all the way up to the incoming waters of the lake. This will help you now all the way through April. Don Pedro has several areas with wooded trees. You can get in there and fish those things a lot of different ways. Spinnerbaits, brush hogs down the trees, Texas rig in the trees, shaky heads right at the base of the trees. They really like that, and actually quite a bit in bow spawn, believe it or not. On Don Pedro, you can catch a lot of fish because they'll move right off the spawning flat right to the first tree they see. So you get up on a flat where there's no trees and you look behind you and there's a row of trees, you just start targeting those trees. They'll also use those right before they move up to spawn. So that's some little custom tips right there for Lake Don Pedro. Most of the fish, 5 to 20 feet. You could find fish in 25-ish, 22-ish, kind of the range. And that's kind of where we park the boat and then just sit there and shake it and catch fish. I know these fish are moving up. They were already off the secondary points and moving into flats when we were there a few weeks back. Right now, I'd fully expect those fish through this weekend, because it's still going to be 70 through Saturday, to be in those areas. Expect with next week's colder weather, colder fronts, those fish to just back out a little bit. Back out to the first ledge, back out to the secondary point, and just kind of wait for the spring weather to come and move back to the spawning areas. You got to remember the night temps aren't going to change much. So water temps are going to come down with the air temperature. Expect the bite to be better the second half of the day. From noon all the way to dark, and coming up here soon in March, we'll get an extra hour of darkness as far as time goes. So expect those second half of the days to be better. The first half of the days be on the reaction side. Throwing your glide baits, throwing your crankbaits, throwing your spinner baits, your Alabama rigs, rip baits. Don't forget the IMA flit 100 and 110, because if you want to get bit, get flit. It's a great spring bait, right? Good search tool, catch a lot of fish. Throw a pin jack, a little red pin jack, 1/4 mile on some rocky and clay banks, and catch some of those pre-spawn fish. So little update on Pedro, a little bit of some spring tips about the lake, a lot of info. Hope you guys enjoy it, and we'll bring in more to you here from RB Bass Outdoors. You guys have a wonderful time. We thank you for following, and make sure you subscribe. Thank you.